Good afternoon and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View. I'm going to go through a live rundown of the events at the Celtic Agm, which is currently underway at Celtic Park. So I'm going to start right at the beginning of the events this morning at Celtic Park. First of all, everyone that was present was Ross Desmond, Dermot Desmond's son, who's taken over the work of biggest shareholder and majority shareholder. Then Sharon Brown was also in the meeting. Brendan Rodgers, Michael Nicholson, Joanne McNairn, Chris Mackay, Elena, the female football coach, Brian Rose, Brian Wilson, and Tom Allison. He sent his apologies for not making the meeting, even though he would have known that the AGM is today. Next up on the agenda, first up on the agenda for the AGM after that, there was a video presentation on Peter Lawwell discussing the figures and the investment and the infrastructure of Celtic Park. More relaxed looking Peter Lawwell, no tie in the video. An important discussion point for Celtic fans is to wear a tie or no tie in this day and age, and I'm a no tie person, even when I was anyway, move on. Barrowfield is expected to be ready in January. We need more players coming through the system. So it's great news for Celtic fans that Barrowfield, the new training complex at Barrowfield, will be up and running at the beginning of January next year. So it's just over a month away, which we'll all be excited about. More fantastic, great news for Celtic and Celtic fans. They then talk about Scotland as a small league with a small audience, so we need to be more creative to attract people to Celtic. I think that the fact that we've got Lennoxtown, we've got the Barrowfield training camp, the Barrowfield one is a massive one for getting the youth players coming through. If they can see that their training complex is just in the shadows of Celtic Park and that's where they will be training, it is an absolute must in this day and age that the players that come through the youth system feel that they're part of a big club and they want to stay at Celtic. So that's good that Barrowfield will be ready in January. Peter Lawwell is obviously the chairman. Peter Lawwell leads the European. He talks about his European exploits. Celtic being in the UEFA Champions League means that other SPFL teams will get around €1 million each this season. So there's a benefit to everyone. There's a benefit to absolute everyone in the Scottish SPFL. Paul Disdale isn't there, Big Dom. It's disappointing to rate a Sevconian terminologies. No show from the leprechaun is normal. The fact that his son, Wee Man Sham, I'm just going to talk about this in a second. The fact that Wee Man Sham, you're saying that there's no show from the leprechaun, his son is taking over all his business duties, and as he enters into retirement, his son wants to have a bigger say on the running of Celtic on a day-to-day basis than what Dermot did. So I think that you'll see that his son is a bit more active than what he was on an ongoing basis. Anyway, Peter Lawwell then spoke about the fact that us being in the Champions League means that other SPFL teams, so your Motherwell, your St Mirren, your Dundee Uniteds and teams like that, your Hearts and Hibs, all get €1 million each this season for Celtic being in the Champions League. We need to make more European competitions expand as we need it. I went on to talk about Peter Lawwell. More games, more certainty of participation by Celtic. And a final thank you to the fans for everything, said Peter Lawwell. Then up next was Michael Nicholson. Michael Nicholson went on to say it's a fantastic year by praising the women's team for making history. He then thanked Brendan Rodgers and Callum McGregor for the first team success, which brings in so much money to the Celtic coffers. The difference between the Europa and the European Champions League has never been so stark, says Callum McGregor. Again, Michael Nicholson and Chris go for the no-tie approach. To be fair, that's usual for them. Interesting that some away teams are happy to cut allocations, but do you think that they'll... it's interesting, that one. away teams are more than happy to cut the away allocation, but when it comes to getting that £1 million in their bank for the fact that Celtic are in the Champions League, they're not going to knock that back, are they? And they can take with one hand and take away with the other. Callum McGregor talking about Lennox Town being refitted, and talking about the fact that it's fantastic. And Barrafield, the 25th of January for the women in youth, and then they went on to talk about the new roof on the main stand. Also, Michael Nicholson looking at investing in projects within the island of Ireland and the USA, which is interesting. Michael Nicholson says the supporters are crucial. The one at Motherwell pushed on by fans. Supporting the USA and the support for the women. Also thanks to the fans for that. I think that they're going to be doing more. It's been a few years. I mean, we did do the tour in America and it was quite lucrative, it has to be said. Celtic will now look to expand the visits to America, I think, due to purely on a financial basis. Looking at the trips that we've had in the Far East in the past, I don't think that they were as lucrative. They're great for growing the fan base slightly, but rewarding the fans that are already there in lucrative countries like the United States of America is not only good for business, but there's not many emerging talents. When you look at the news this morning, the fantastic news, Celtic know how to control the media today, the fantastic news that we haven't spoken about yet. Alistair Johnston, yes, Alistair Johnston signs a brand new contract with Celtic until 2029. Is he the future captain? Many people are saying. Yep, I think he's maybe the future captain at Celtic, and it'll be interesting to see how his future goes now that he has signed that new deal. And if anybody wants to try and buy Alistair Johnston, they're going to have to fork out a ridiculous amount of money, which I don't see them doing. But I think that Alistair Johnston could be one for the future when it comes to captain material. Tony Hamilton went on to discuss the Celtic Foundation. Tony Hamilton is one of the what I call Mr. Celtic. I've met Tony on many occasions. He's a fantastic guy. He's Celtic through and through. To think that he went from being stadium announcer back in the day, stadium announcer, to running the Celtic Foundation, and the fantastic amount of money that the Celtic Foundation does raise for causes all around, not only Scotland, but the UK and the globe. Tony Hamilton spoke about the focus on poverty and inclusion. Open stadium 4 nights a week for people, he's talking about also. He says 75% of the money spent is predominantly in the north-east city of the city, the north and the east of the city. We also have 4 sites in Ireland, in Sligo and Derry and the USA. The foundation is not about the brand or the football. It's about improving people's lives. I think that we need to do on this channel, I think that we need to do a fundraiser for either the Celtic Foundation or the Cano Foundation, which is fantastic. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while. So I think that as we get closer to Christmas, we might do a big charity event on the channel, helping out either the Celtic Foundation or the Cano Foundation. And Tony Hamilton then went on to say that they aim to accommodate 300 people in need at Celtic Park on Christmas Day. That's absolutely fantastic that they're going to open the doors to 300 people that are in need and give them a fantastic dinner on Christmas Day. And I think that you will get a lot of Celtic fans that would actually love to participate in that, to help make such a memorable day. And that's everything that Celtic are all about. And it's great to see that the Celtic Foundation is still a massive part of Celtic all these years later. It says, remember, I'm trying to summarise statements. It says, anyway, resolutions. Peter Lawwell thanked the Celtic Foundation and Tony Hamilton, and then you had all the resolutions for reappointment of the board members. And there were a few in the room that slightly against one or two of them. We're not going to talk about that. Anyway, now moving on to the Q&A section, the video interviews with Elena and Brendan. Elena talking about the incredible achievement of the Champions League qualification for the women. And you have to remember that there's not many clubs around Europe have the men and the women's team participating in the Champions League. although it hasn't been a favourable Champions League exploit for the Celtic women team, it is fantastic that they are there, and they're there on merit. And I think that for a club, the prestige and the esteem that come with having with both the men's and the women's football team participating in both European Champions League competitions is absolutely fantastic. And I wish that more fans would go to the women's game on a regular basis, rather than just turning up to try and say for the Champions League games and big games to show their support, to have their own agenda with having a Celtic end. Anyway, that's for another day. Elena went on to say the Celtic women are at the start of something special and at the start of where we want to get to. Brendan Rodgers has a tie on for his coming off a treble, talking about last season. And the treble that was won by the previous manager, is Brendan talking about last season, saying coming off the treble was difficult. The first part of the season wasn't the intensity that he wanted last season, but having us back in the top flight of European football has been fantastic. Dortmund he had to address, and the response from the players from the Dortmund game it shows that we can defend. It gives us the confidence to succeed against RB Leipzig. And Brendan Rodgers talking about Arne Engels and Adam Ida. They have the power and the physicality is what you need at Champions League level. That will get a lot of tongues wagging, because a lot of Celtic fans think that we overpaid for Adam Ida, and they also think that Adam Ida just isn't good enough. But Brendan Rodgers seems to think that both Arne Engels and Adam Ida, his exact words were, have the power and the physicality which you need at Champions League football. Next up, Brendan Rodgers. In the modern club role, Paul Tisdale is essential. Brendan Rodgers went on to talk about the changes at Lennoxtown and said credit to the board on this, what they've spent on Lennoxtown and the medical centre and the changing facilities, bringing Lennoxtown, making it more appealing to players that are coming into Celtic. And next up on the agenda, Brendan Rodgers said that the team is in a good place, both physically, mentally. He said December is a crucial period and we need the full squad. We'll look at it one game at a time, and that's one thing that Brendan Rodgers will be telling to the media. And we know that Brendan and the boys look at it as one game at a time, but Brendan Rodgers also likes to look at it as a block of games. And as long as we have the success in every little block of games that we have during the season, that should ultimately lead to the prizes at the end of the season, and maybe even the prize next month, and we'll get to that later. Questions, diversity at board level. Delighted that we have 3 women in senior levels. And enough about that. Joanne is company secretary, indicating the changes being made at boardroom level with diversity and of age. Gone are the sort of the look that the board that was a Tory like little. Anyway, who was last Celtic player to score against Rangers? Gary Hooper is one of those questions. This season we'll be going for 55. If we make it ours, we'll make it the real deal. It was one of the questions. Anyway, a couple of nonsense comments then coming up. And some more questions from people within the audience. Next step, the Celtic Foundation talking about the sleep out at Celtic Park. They praised the Celtic staff, saying that the Celtic staff and everyone that took part on the sleep out is a credit to Celtic. More questions from the disabled sport about meetings on accessibility seating. In the minutes will be shared. Peter Lawwell talks about the work that Alexis and John Paul Taylor does. Proud of the work that Alexis and John Paul Taylor does. If you don't know, Alexis heads up the ticket office, and John Paul Taylor, he's our man on Twitter. He is our fans liaison officer, and John Paul, JP's been at the job for so many years, and he again is one of the fantastic guys that just he knows Celtic inside out, and it's been great having met him on a few occasions. And anyway, there was one question asked of the board Will Rod Stewart be putting money into the club? He's at a lot of games with friends. And Peter Lawwell answered that Rod Stewart contributes to the Celtic Foundation. His kindness and generosity is second to none. And then was asked an important one about tickets. The cost of tickets at Celtic are going up and up. Can we not use some of the cash in the bank to reduce the cost of the tickets? Which is an interesting one. Last season we paid almost £12 million in corporation tax. Says, we spent a lot of time discussing and debating this. We increased the tickets in the price of inflation, but our inflation rate is far higher than we absorb the prices. Point understood, and we always consider it as they generally do. And that's kind of as up to date as we are at the moment. There's a couple of other ones we'll just go on about. Let me just catch up with this. Asking about John Beaton. Is he incompetent? Oh my goodness, you've got to laugh. Who was the last youth player to start a first team game? Goes one question. Brendan Rodgers says, I was 15 at youth development. I have an idea of what is needed. Callum, James and Tony set the culture, said Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers said that he gets the point that we want more youth players. It says, Brendan Rodgers then says, we look at everything and all things are considered when looking at players. The question is about the Celtic end. This is not a club initiative. We are aware that, and this is what I mean about this agenda for the Celtic end, and I make no apologies. I don't apologise for highlighting it. It's okay a certain fans group turning up for Celtic women games to have their own agenda for the Celtic end, but I wish they would. Why don't you turn up every week for the women's game? If you want to follow women's football, back the women's football. Don't turn up and have your own agenda. I love everything that the Green Brigade and the boys do. I seriously do. I mean, this channel was built on the foundations of the Green Brigade and the boys back in the day. But I think particularly using the women's football for your own agenda, it doesn't sit well with me, because it's not a really Celtic thing to do, is it? I mean, Celtic are all about giving, and that's quite sort of inward looking. Anyway, they were asked, Michael Nicholson was asked about the Celtic end, and Michael Nicholson went on to say, it is not a club initiative. We are aware we sold out. Most of the supporters like it, but we are aware many fans would like to access more safe standing. We are aware many fans would like to access more safe standing. So will they give them more safe standing at the other end of the stadium rather than a Celtic end? Michael Nicholson says that we're always looking at views of all the supporters. There is a demand for more safe standing, but the challenge is how to accommodate. No specific plan to do anything with the safe standing section in the near future, said Michael Nicholson. Question about the Celtic FC Foundation. Frustrated about money paid or away on fines. That's nothing to do with the foundation. Also discussing the way that our away fans are treated in Europe. Talking about, I mean, the way that fans are treated in Europe are generally the way that all away fans are treated. I don't think that it's specific to just Celtic supporters. You've got to remember that European football is not used to massively travelling supports. When it comes to the Champions League, it's completely different. But on a domestic front, most European nations don't have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,000 people travelling to away games. It's very, very small in comparison. Hence the reason for big. And I'm not trying to stick up for coppers in various countries. I'm just talking about the reality of football at European level. Anyway, last season, Peter Lawwell says, 90,000 in fines last season, 47,000 in fines so far. Long-standing issue with flares, etc., but that's not specific to Celtic, said Michael Nicholson. Like, it's not just a Celtic thing, so do not try to just blame the Green Brigade and say it's a Celtic thing. This is a wider football thing that we're talking about. So, although Peter Lawwell says that it was 90 grand in fines last season, 47,000 and so far this season, with still 4 games to go, plus another 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 in the Champions League after that. But Michael Nicholson said it's a long-standing issue, flares, etc., but it is not specific to Celtic. Michael Nicholson then went on to say, one of the challenges that we give out 600 tickets for Tynecastle, and no doubt people will attend that. Yes, they give out 600 tickets. We get over... Yeah, I'm just watching the time. I need to go in 5 minutes. We do get only 750 tickets for Tynecastle. The fans only get 600 of those tickets. So Celtic keep a lot of 150 tickets for Celtic corporate and Celtic players and Celtic staff and such to give out their tickets. Anyway, that's about as much as question about London Road, the cycle lanes, reducing load capacity. Michael Nicholson says we are not consulted. The Glasgow City Council again looking to bring back parking restrictions, which will ultimately affect fans. And if you want to increase the main stand at Celtic Park, where are these people going to park? We need to look at the bigger, wider access to Celtic Park and the fact that there is very limited parking ability. Excuse me. Talking about the main stand. If Celtic offered me a season book, I'd bite your hand off. There are thousands like me waiting to go. One of the challenges, talking about that, is obviously the main stand. They've never come back with the answer to that question. Anyway, that gives you a slight indication of the type of questions that have been asked at the Celtic AGM today. I think that it's been quite fair, the comments that have been in so far. Big Rabbi says, what's this pish about Ada? The Grumpy Greek was poor for months, and so was Kuhn, Matt O'Reilly. No one gave him the time. Baz, where was our notification? I have no idea, Mr. Quinn. You'll need to go and watch it from the start again. That's all that I've got time for today. I apologise that I am having to cut this live a little bit early, but we have been invited out for a lunch at a restaurant. It's more a tasting thing. You don't need to know that anyway. But anyway, the owners have asked us down to sample the food for the new menu in the new year. Lorna Gallagher, no notifications again. YouTube is right. It said Lorna. Apologise about the notifications. You can go back and watch it all from the beginning. And just one last check to see if there's any more notifications for the AGM. Question on static direction of women's team. Thanking Elena for her passion. Question about London Road. Yeah, that's about it. Anyway, we'll do a live later on when we see what Brendan Rodgers has to say when he takes to the media. He's obviously going to be asked a lot about the performance of Celtic on and off the park, and he will also be asked about the team and everything. So yeah, lots more to come this afternoon. Make sure you tune in and check out the notifications if they're not there. Just keep on checking back on the channel. Anyway, have a fantastic day.